So I've been on a fair few interview panels for a different range of grant applications. And I think there are some very particular memorable candidates at interview that I can think of where they are able to show their methodological strengths as well as their genuine passion for the research that they're doing, and also able to show how they are really authentic and how they engage with the process. So a really good interview is someone who is prepared, but not over-prepared, who is confident, but not arrogant or defensive, and who shows depth of their scientific knowledge, but also breadth of their kind of thinking. And what they are able to show is how they are ready to transition with their research, particularly for a personal award. They're able to bring that all together in a very short time where they can really show that they are compelling and that they can convince the panel that it's really worthwhile to invest in their research, but not only their research, in their future as a scientific member of the community that's going to really do very robust research that's going to have impact. Okay, so there's something about scientific excellence and vision and having a really compelling narrative in terms of the research, being able to really show that they know the research, that they are up to date with all the cutting edge science relative to their work, that their work and their proposed work is really scientifically rigorous. So it's not just covering over the issues or the challenges, but they really understand it. So it may be that they understand that there's a systematic review that they're building on. They're able to articulate where the gaps are, but then they're also able to articulate why addressing that gap matters. So why does it matter, and particularly to the health and social care of the communities that they're researching with. They need to also be able to present their research as being distinct from their supervisor's research and how they're developing their career and moving in a different direction and creating their own niche. Now, that doesn't mean moving institutions necessarily, because we see a lot of candidates who will be working with their same teams that they did their PhDs with, or with their mentors. But what they're doing is adding new mentors, new directions, creating a new, unique area that is about their future. There's also something about being able to show that they've done an assessment of their own development needs, and they've worked out who the best people are to support them, and how through this funding and this process, which has required a lot of reflection, they're going to get, with some investment, a clear opportunity to transition to independence. Part of that is showing their leadership potential and their ability to communicate, and showing that they can articulate, recognizing that in a panel, there's going to be members of the public, but there's also going to be experts in their field, and they're going to be non-experts in their field. And the likelihood is that they're going to be more non-experts than there are experts. So they're going to have to be able to explain complex features of their work in a way that is robust and reliable, but they're also going to need to, I don't think the word is defend, but justify their methodology to experts. So it's a really tricky, challenging pathway to navigate that requires preparation and thought. I think there is also something about being able to so it's not being defensive and recognizing that your panel is really wanting to invest in you. They're wanting to see the best in you. They've brought you to interview because they think your work is worth exploring. But as part of that process, there is peer review and there is scientific review. And that's actually part of the process of any academic moving forward as part of independence. So being able to take feedback and reflect on that feedback, not necessarily get defensive, but also show that ability to respond and adapt and recognize when actually there's valid feedback and think about ways of addressing that or being responsive to that. So there's something about flexibility, almost reflection and flexibility that comes in as well. Often there'll be people who, since submitting their application, it may be 3-4 months, and they may have either published another paper, or they may have done more work. They may have done more public involvement, or they may have thought about things, or there may have been other emerging knowledge. So there's something about between submitting and interviewing, about staying up to date with the current literature and being able to address that, about continuing to develop ideas so that when you go into that interview and during your presentation, that you take that opportunity to show that you are at the cutting edge, but also to show that you've continued to develop the ideas. So doing that quite upfront is, I've often seen in interviews that people will say in their first slide, since submitting my application, these are the things that have happened. So it's taking that up front and saying, I've done things slightly differently, and not being frightened to say, this might mean some slight changes, but the principle still stands, the question still stands. Actually, these changes are improvements. So it's thinking about that, but also taking that interview and that opportunity, the presentation, as the opportunity to really expand on what you couldn't put in to a limited word count application. So this is the chance to really enjoy it, like to actually have that undivided attention from the panel to really explore the research that you're absolutely fascinated in. So I think in that space, it is about getting the key messages across, about reminding the panel about why they should invest in you, why they should support your research, why the research is important. Potentially, this is the point to reinforce the health and social care impact and the importance of the research, but also the reasons why they would invest in you. So you are setting the tone, you are showing that you can synthesize and summarize and bring things together. And you can use that in that time to show your authenticity, but that you really believe in it, that you're enthusiastic about it, and that you are confident that you can lead this work into the future. So there is something about being able to have that summing up. I always say you need to have the first two minutes really down pat, and you need to have that closing sentence tight, because that's about how you set it up and deliver it and close it. Whereas if you just stop, it's like, okay. So sometimes, depending on the panel or depending on the funding scheme, people will either get very specific reviewer comments back between stage 1 and 2, or they might get very general comments back, or they might get no comments back. But if you get specific comments, or even more general ones, it's about really looking at them and saying, okay, are these valid? Are these important? way that you respond to reviewer comments and panel questionings is really giving the panel an indication of how you might manage peer review in the future and how you might thrive as an independent researcher, because part of being an independent researcher is to be able to take that peer input and really work with it and respond to it. So I think there is something about genuinely thanking reviewers for their inputs, because most of the time reviewer input and comments comes from a good place, and that those comments are valuable. Whether you agree with them or not, they are valuable comments. Addressing each point systematically is important. And that would be the same as if you're writing a journal article and you get peer review and you go, thank you very much for your comments. I've summarized them in these key themes. So you don't have a lot of time in an interview to be able to do that, but you should be able to demonstrate really careful consideration of those the comments. And where those criticisms are valid, it's about saying, absolutely, thank you, and acknowledging them, and then giving a counter argument or a response. If you disagree, the same would apply. It would be saying, well, yeah, I can see where this comes from, but in my view, or based on my research or with my evidence, and counter reasoning, but provide evidence for that. Showing how the feedback has strengthened your proposal. So you could be doing that if you have feedback and you can then address it in a presentation, or how it will strengthen your proposal or thinking is really important. So how you handle the reviewer's comments signals how you might behave in the future, how you might collaborate, and how you will engage with scientific discourse. And the same will go for the questions and the panel questions. So what you're really looking to be able to demonstrate is that growth mindset and that flexibility in being able to respond and interact in discussions.